Another question that we've received from many people, even outside of the kids in our group, is what does it mean to take up your cross?
Yeah, and that question comes from something that Jesus said that is fairly convicting and pretty straightforward. In Luke 9, verse 23, Jesus said, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." And so many people want to know what that means, because Jesus says, if you want to follow me, this is what it looks like. It looks like denying yourself, taking up your cross daily, and following him. And when you start to look at that passage and look at what Jesus is actually saying, he's really kind of paralleling the idea of denying yourself and taking up your cross. The point is, if you see a cross, what does that stand for? And a cross back then stood for death. And so for someone to carry their own cross meant dying to themselves, or as Jesus would also say, denying yourself. And so what it means to take up your cross really means dying to yourself or denying yourself. And so Jesus says the Christian life, if you want to follow him, it means denying yourself daily, or another way to say that would be dying to yourself daily. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer has a really great quote on what it means to deny yourself. He says, the disciple must say to himself the same words Peter said of Christ when he denied him. I know not this man. And I think that's really helpful to think of. When Peter denied Jesus, he said, I don't know him. I don't know what you're talking about. And Bonhoeffer says, now we apply that to ourselves and say, I don't know that man. I know Christ.
Mm-hmm. And Jesus goes on in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 14 to talk more about what it means if you don't do this. And it's called the cost of discipleship. In Luke chapter 14, verse 27, Jesus says, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And verse 33 is kind of more powerful. It says, so therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. So that's him saying, if you're not going to take up your cross, if you're not going to continually die to your old self or the old man, as Paul would say, Jesus says, it's out of the question. You cannot be my disciple.
And as we thought about it, we thought it'd be good to give a couple just practical examples from our own lives of times when we've either denied self or took up our cross, and not because we actually think that we are the epitome of those who do such things, but sometimes it's helpful for people to understand what it means by seeing how we've done that in our lives. And for myself, one of the kind of glaring examples of that has just been my call to ministry. That I wasn't expecting to become a pastor or a youth pastor. I had a successful dock and boat lift business up on Mille Lacs Lake. It was growing. It was doubling in size every year. It was growing really well. And then kind of out of the blue, God powerfully called me to the ministry. And at that point, I had two options. I could follow my own way, or I could follow God's way. And I thankfully, by God's grace, I chose to follow God's way. And I denied myself, and I denied my business and my plans, and I turned and followed him. I died to myself and my desires and followed Christ's plan. And one of the benefits of that example, I think, is that dying to self always sounds like this kind of boring thing, except for I look back and I died to my old plans, and yet this has been one of the greatest things I've ever done.
Mm-hmm. And from my life, a little more recent example, I've just recently helped one of my friends move from Minnesota to Missouri. And I knew that leading up to it, I said, I know that when I go on this trip, we're going to drive for 12, 13 hours, and then we can't even move them right in. We have to jump from place to place to place so that we can finally move them in. And I could have chose to stay here and do other things that I would have been otherwise happy to do. But I said, you know what, for God's glory and for the love of my friend, I am going to do this, because I know that it is more pleasing for me to do this than to do something that I want to do on my own.
So denying self looks like choosing God and his will over our own will and our own desires. And Jesus says, if you want to follow me, you do that every day. you wake up and you choose God's will over your life. We just wanted to wrap up too by quoting from John Calvin on the Christian life. I think it's a really powerful quote and a really beautifully written quote by him too. He says, "But if we then are not our own, but the Lord's, it's clear what error we must flee and where we must direct all the acts of our life. We are not our own. Let not our reason nor our will, therefore, sway our plans and deeds. We are not our own. Let us therefore not set it as our goal to seek what is expedient for us according to the flesh. We are not our own. Insofar as we can, let us therefore forget ourselves and all that is ours. But on the other hand, we are God's. Let us therefore live for him and die for him. We are God's. Let his wisdom and will therefore rule all our actions. We are God's. Let all the parts of our life accordingly strive toward him as our only lawful